because it is your needs that matter at the end of the day. And when they go unmet, those emotions are simply going to intensify because that's their job. Their job is to keep you safe. The way you feel about yourself matters. The way you conduct yourself, the way you carry yourself out matters, because it's not only about how you feel about yourself, it's also the energy that you're giving to others around you, and that impacts the way that they treat you. And I want to talk to you about how you carry yourselves forward in your intimate relationships and in your personal relationships. Because if you have a low self-esteem, people tend to think that self-esteem is like a switch. You know, you can fake it till you make it, and you can just be confident, turn it on and off. And in some situations that might be true. So if you have to give a presentation at work, or if you need to kind of give a pitch, a sales pitch, you kind of, there's a bit of faking that goes on, and you know, you kind of do a salesy kind of presentation and you kind of buy people's interest. But when it comes to deep personal relationships over the longer term, it's just not possible to sustain that. At some point, that facade will break. And I want to talk specifically about the way self-esteem impacts our ability to relate to others that are really close to us. Now, there might be some people who have kind of a reliance and a dependence on their partner in order to feel safe emotionally. And this relates to people who are, for example, anxiously attached. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have people who avoid getting too emotionally close with their partner because it feels very uncomfortable and unsafe and unfamiliar. And so therefore, there's this kind of avoidance towards wanting to get too close to a partner, which has its own problems. And then you're trying to really find a balance in between. So instead of being avoidant, or instead of being too dependent, you want this interdependence. You want to have your own life to some degree, yet within the context of a supportive partner, where they can be there for you and you can be there for them. Now, there's a couple things I want to speak about in terms of how we engage in conflicts with those partners and with those people. Because the way that arguments go, I think, speaks a lot in terms of how you feel about yourself and what the dynamic is in your relationship. So let's say you get into a conflict and you are completely dismissive of where your partner is coming from. Because at that time, you are hijacked by your emotions. You're feeling very angry. And the only way to satisfy that anger and to make that anger go away is to get your point across, that you cannot even entertain any other point of view, that your view is right. And that's how you feel. So you need to dig into that deeper. Just because you're feeling angry and you have to get your point across doesn't mean you're necessarily right. Now, there might be some things that you really have a firm foot in, you stand on principle on, and you really firmly believe in, whether it's based in faith or whether it's based on just your own personal opinions on things. You might have your own beliefs, firm beliefs that you just will not negotiate on. So they form your non-negotiables. But the merit in questioning yourself comes when you can really test the beliefs you have about yourself. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're having a discussion with your partner around happiness. Okay. You believe happiness doesn't come from the outside, it comes from the inside, and your partner is saying, no, you can, buy happiness, and there are things you can do to make yourself happy. You don't need to always find it on the inside. Your life experience may have taught you that you cannot rely on others to be happy. You have to do everything yourself. You can't even rely on others anyway. You can't trust them. The only person you can trust is yourself. The only person who's reliable is yourself. You have to all get it from within. And that's been so concretely enforced within you based on your past experience that to think any other way just doesn't make sense. So therefore, you're very concretely thinking that way. Now, it might be that that belief system works for you and that's what you believe. But ask yourself, do I believe that because this is something I genuinely believe in and that it's worked for me in my life? Or do I believe that because my emotions are so tied up to this philosophy and way of thinking that I find it threatening, or my emotions find it threatening to even entertain any other point of view? And the benefit of questioning yourself and allowing yourself an open mind into hearing your partner's opinion or hearing a different opinion is to invite it in and then allow yourself to be challenged. So allow your existing philosophy to be challenged. And say, okay, let's say for a moment, happiness doesn't come only from within; it can come from outside. What does that look like? What does that feel like? When you start that process of questioning yourself, you are essentially testing the very theory that you believed all this time. And the benefit of that is not only will it enforce or assure you that what you believe is right for you, but it also gives you the opportunity to test your theory for any cracks. Has this thing I've always believed that happiness comes from the inside, is that true? Actually, it doesn't always apply in these cases. Maybe this is where my partner's got a point. So you are having an open mind, and you are allowing yourself to determine where you might be wrong, or where you might have been misled, or where there might be improvements in terms of what you believe in. Now, it's a bit of an odd example I gave, but the point is, if you be open-minded and recognize the impact that your emotions have in not wanting you to consider other person's opinion on a certain subject, could be something you're very, passionate about. If you're aware of that impact, then you can manage the impact that your emotions have on you in those situations. Because if you allow that anger to completely consume you, or whatever emotion it is to completely overtake you, what you're doing is you're not allowing yourself the opportunity to seek another point of view, and therefore to test the theory you're holding. And the reason I mention this is because when we get into arguments with our partners or with our loved ones, we can very easily go into this pattern of, I'm feeling agitated, frustrated. On the subconscious level, I need to get rid of this feeling. And the only way I can get rid of this feeling is to end the argument. And I'm going to end the argument in the quickest way I can. And so I'm going to stand my ground. I'm just going to be stubborn and stick with my thing. Now, it might be that your opinion is right and that's what you believe in. But the point I'm making is, if you allow the emotions you're experiencing, whether it's anger or fear, in the moment to lead you to winning that argument no matter what, then ask yourself, even though I won the argument, is it because my point of view was valid, or is it because my emotions were driving me there? So when we take a chance to slow down and just label our emotions as they're happening, okay, I'm feeling angry right now, agitated. I know this is because I don't like this conflict. I don't like to talk about this. I just want this to end. Instead of me going down my usual role of let me just win this argument and get it over with, is there a way I can bring in how I'm feeling into the conversation with my partner? So instead of being, presenting as kind of emotional and saying, I've got to win, your partner's going to read that as, okay, he's being defensive, or he or she's being defensive, he or she is being stubborn, whatever. But if you instead say, look, I'm feeling quite agitated at the moment. I'm noticing I'm feeling agitated, and I think it's because I don't like really talking about this. Once you open and introduce this vulnerability into the conversation, you are now shifting on a different path that will allow your partner to no longer read you as being emotionally defensive, but rather as someone who's recognized the impact their emotions are having on them and is being more open, which is going to lead to your partner being less likely to be as aggressive or kind of pursuing you on that conversation or on that argument. They're probably more likely to be curious around how you're feeling and be more vulnerable themselves. And that is going to lead to a completely different kind of discussion. Now you're moving away from a traditional conflict, back and forth, I've got to win, I've got to win the argument, they've got to win the argument, towards a more empathic conversation that recognizes how each people is feeling in the conversation. Because the point is, we each feel emotions, not in every conflict or every conversation, but there's some heated discussions where we feel emotions. We're just not very good at talking about them. We're not very good at expressing them. And I'm not saying that you have to talk about your emotions for the sake of it or because I'm a counselor. I'm saying there's a benefit of recognizing your emotion, not so much for the other person, but actually for yourself. Because once you catch the emotion you're experiencing, so let's say you're in an argument or a conflict and you're feeling quite agitated, once you call it out and you bring it into the conversation, the agitation and anger you feel can no longer play out the role it wants to. What it wants to do is to cause you to satisfy it. And normally the way we satisfy anger or fear is to basically do as it says. We have a fear of going out at night, so we stay at home, for example. Emotions are very powerful in terms of how they drive our behavior. So when we label it, and especially when we have the courage to talk about it in the conversation, saying, I've noticed right now I'm feeling angry because this topic's coming up. I don't like talking about this. I've always felt this way. And, I wonder whether the way I feel about this kind of situation is right. I've always believed it. So therefore, I think this is how it is. I've never given myself the opportunity to see things differently. Even saying that to your partner who's coming from a different point of view is like a breath of fresh air. Instead of them coming with this conflicts and hard-headedness about making their point, they're going to see the vulnerability that you've exchanged and they're going to mirror that. Because now you are activating a different set of responses that's going to trigger a different set of responses within your partner. So you have the power to very quickly shift the trajectory of the conversation you're having with your loved one. This is where labeling the emotions you're feeling and bringing them into the conversation matters. This cannot happen automatically, and this does not happen on the first try. This is like, one of the final stages of emotional regulation. In order to get to that stage, you've got to go all the way back to firstly learning to listen to yourself. You have to learn to listen to yourself. This is something, I've said this before, we as a society are not good at doing. We don't stop. We don't slow down. We don't learn to listen to what emotions we're feeling. And we can't always label emotions as a result. So therefore, you have to take a step back from that and listen to your bodily sensations and feel your bodily sensations, because that's where the anxiety is often stored. In the nervous system. The nervous system becomes triggered when there is a physical threat, and it becomes as triggered when there is an emotional threat or when there is some emotional discomfort. It kicks in, it makes us panic, it makes us escape or look for a way out. When instead we have to lean into it without any judgment, without compassion, with full compassion, in a safe space, to listen to what our body's communicating to us and noticing where the tension is. I had tension in my jaws and in my shoulders that always hunched. I noticed I kind of like pace up and down, and then I realized, I'm pacing again. It's amazing how our bodies adapted to the emotions and stress and frustration that we've stored because we haven't communicated it. And because we can't catch ourselves and do what we need to in the moment to help ground ourselves and regulate ourselves, we end up suppressing it without even knowing. So there might be some of you watching this video be like, what is this guy talking about? Like, I'm fine. And I've got to say, about 10 years ago, I went through this experience. I went to the doctor, and the doctor says, you've went for a condition for my skin. And it says, it's stress. Within 2 seconds, the doctor said it's stress. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not stressed. It's only years after where I realized, man, I was stressed. I was suppressing my emotions. And it's a long journey to get to the point where I can now express my emotions. And it's benefited my life significantly because I'm able to assert myself. My self-confidence has grown as a result. And this is something I work with my clients all the time. And I can see the kind of changes happening on a real-time basis. Small changes, but progressive. This is the point. I said at the beginning, it's not like a switch you can flick on and off. It really isn't. It's a long process towards understanding what emotions you're having. And the more you attune yourself to how you're feeling and how you're thinking, and the more you realize what impacts these things are having, the closer you will get to understanding what your genuine needs are and why you're experiencing the emotions you do. Because the emotions are simply carrying a message from your needs underneath it. And because we're not good at listening to our emotions and recognizing it, we can't even access what we need. So we might be in a conflict where we kind of lash out and get angry. And the other person might say, you've got anger problems, you need to go to anger management, all these things. And you kind of look back thinking, man, where did that come from? I just lashed out. Why? We don't often ask why. Why did I feel shameful when this person said that? Why do I feel fearful right now? I mean, I'm looking around. I have no reason to feel fearful. Why am I feeling a bit unsettled right now? What's that about? Once we start to ask these kind of questions introspectively, and we gain a better understanding of how we feel and who we are as a result, we are able to translate that positive, clear energy into our relationships, and it translates into conflict. So the next time you get in conflict, you'll notice, I can see more of the patterns, not only about how I'm feeling and the things I'm saying to this person, my partner, but actually how they're responding back. They seem to be responding now from a defensive place because they've learned that I've been angry in the past, and they've learned to shield themselves emotionally and just attack me in order to prevent them from being hurt by my anger. So you get to see the kind of blueprint, if you like, of how we react in relationships and how we generally feel about ourselves. So when you start this process of introspection, being open-minded enough to allow yourself to ask yourself questions or challenge your own ideas or ask yourself how you're feeling without judgment, you are able to start reading the blueprints of not only how you relate in certain situations, but also how the relationship dynamic you have is formed and how it flows. And if you understand that, you can change it. Now, there's a couple of things I would like to suggest, and it sounds cliche, but the reason it's cliche is because it works. The first one is meditation. When you meditate, I will say there's two forms of meditation that I'm coming to discover. One form is when you need to calm yourself. So let's say you're feeling quite agitated and stressed, you're feeling maybe even overwhelmed. There's a meditation that you can do. You take 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes, and in a quiet environment for yourself, you basically ground yourself in the present moment. So away from the stress and the emotions, away from the thoughts and the criticism and feeling low, you're detaching from these ideologies, concepts, feelings. You're detaching from them in your head, and you're moving towards your body. You're feeling your feet on the ground. You're relaxing your shoulders. You're noticing where there's tension in your body. You're just noticing things one at a time, very simply, and you're grounding yourself in the present moment. This is a calming activity because you're activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So that counteracts the stress response in our body. So that's why meditation works on a physiological level so well. So that's one kind of meditation where after 5-10 minutes you feel, I feel much better. Okay. But that meditation for me is more of I need to reset my nervous system and calm down. There's another type of meditation, which I alluded to earlier in this video, where you ask yourself questions in the moment and in the heat of the emotion. So rather than having that space for yourself to calm down, which is what you need, and I certainly recommend it to do it every day for at least 10 minutes. When you notice yourself next time getting stressed or frustrated, you may not get it at first, but eventually with practice, you will notice, I'm feeling angry right now. What's just happened? Maybe I'm at work and my colleague said something, maybe they were sarcastic, or my wife or husband said something that I thought was kind of pessimistic. Maybe they're talking to me like I'm a kid. It could be anything. What's just happened? What's triggered this anger within me? Okay. How do I want to react? What is the anger telling me to react as? And how do I think I could react? So by essentially stopping in the moment and catching yourself feeling those emotions, you are able to dictate how you respond. So therefore, you will not be mercy to your emotions, which is emotional dysregulation. Instead, you are choosing how you wish to respond after you've acknowledged how you felt and you've accepted you felt that way and not judged yourself for it. Over time, with practice, this is emotional regulation. This is going to help you in order to not allow those emotions to get any bigger than they need to be. At the end of the day, your emotions are not there to hurt you. They are there to protect you. But each emotion you feel carries a message of your needs. This is why it matters so much, because it is your needs that matter at the end of the day. And when they go unmet, those emotions are simply going to intensify because that's their job. Their job is to keep you safe. and they're communicating a need. But if you don't listen to it, and if you allow yourself to get carried away by the surface emotion and not ask questions to go deeper to the need, you will end up being in this endless cycle of emotional dysregulation. And we see it in relationships where people, will jump from abusive relationship to abusive relationship. And there are going to be some extreme examples of that. But essentially, this is how you change the patterns of how you relate to others and how you relate to yourself, is stopping and catching yourself in the moment. So those are the two types of meditation. And the second thing I'd say is journaling. So writing down how you're feeling. Now, I've done videos before, and you can click a link to watch one of my videos on how you can structure journals. And this is something I will be covering in future videos because I think it's such good practice. Even if you don't feel there's anything really to write about, the art of writing and expressing yourself, and it could be through poetry, it could be through narrative form, it could be through just bullet points. The art of just writing down what's going on for you, what thoughts you're having, builds to your self-awareness journey. And over the long haul, with consistent practice, will allow you and support you in being an emotionally regulated, interdependent person. That not only is good for you, but will serve your relationships as well. I think it's important that we kind of spend some time, and that you spend some time also reflecting on your relationships and reflecting on your role in relationships. We can very easily slip into roles of, the classic one is the people pleaser. My wife or husband's told me they expect the house clean. I'm going to do that because I want to please them. But stop and ask yourself, okay, I want to be in a positive relationship and I want to do what I can to be supportive and play my part. But where is this need coming from to please them? So let's say I didn't clean up. How would I feel if I didn't? How do I think they would react if they saw I didn't clean up? So ask yourself these questions and become curious about yourself. Become curious. That's what matters. Because when you're curious, almost like a child in play, they don't really, especially younger children, there's no rule. They're just exploring. They're curious. They're touching different things and seeing different colors and shapes. There's no right or wrong. They're just exploring. And I think I want to encourage you to invite that kind of same childlike curiosity in terms of how you relate to yourself and how you understand yourself. Just become curious as to why you think the way you do, why you feel the way you do. Once you start that process of looking inward, you have begun the journey towards self-awareness. You have begun that journey towards emotional regulation, and this will serve you in your relationships for years to come. But remember, it's not an end goal, it's a process. I'll be sharing in future videos different activities that you can do to help support you on that journey. But start with being open enough to ask yourself questions that might even challenge how you currently think and feel. And also be curious around your emotions and the role they're having in not only how you feel, but how you relate to others in your relationships. If you got value from this video, please subscribe and like the video. There's going to be more videos coming out very soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.